So what does it mean for Ukraine if Pokrovsk falls? Because I know it's a very important supply line there.
Yeah, it's the crossroad connection, and also there was the unique mine for the special coal, which is kind of unique and was used for the metal production in Ukrainian Donbass. So Ukraine is losing this part of economy. Yeah, it's now been severely damaged, not destroyed for what I know, that mine. So it not only hits the, like, let's say it doesn't only hit the logistics of Donbass, but it only also hits economy capabilities of
Sure.
Ukraine. So that's why Pokrovsk is important. Also, it is important because it's the main crossroad. And after Pokrovsk, there are 2 or 3 maximum defense lines for Russians to reach the open area where they might proceed faster. By the way, Ukraine is quite successful in the northern part of Pokrovsk, Dobropilya, where Russians actually already broke through the main Ukrainian defense lines before in August. It was just not controlled by Ukrainian infantry. Ukraine thought that, okay, maybe we should concentrate forces on Pokrovsk and slept this Russian attack. Russians didn't expect it themselves to break through that part too. But Ukraine did the good step. They deployed Azov, First Corps, 93rd Brigade, 25th. They were very successful. Now it's 33rd Brigade working there. So Ukraine is on counterattack in Dobropilya. Actually, it was more threatening for Ukrainian army than Pokrovsk itself, because there
Mm.
Russians could have encircled entire regions. Well, they had the chance to bypass that main defense line and to encircle Konstantinivka, Drushkivka, Kramatorsk, and Slavyansk. So I think that action of Ukrainian command was very competent. But defense of Pokrovsk, there are big issues, let's say.
How big of an impact do you think it will have to the negotiations that are, happening behind the scenes, or hopefully going to be happening behind the scenes? In the latest discussions, that um, his alleged offer to Trump is that Ukraine gives up the Donbass, Donetsk and Luhansk. Luhansk already under Russian control. Donetsk is mostly under Russian control, and Russia is advancing. Pokrovsk is in the Donbass, and then in return frees the lines in Zaporizhia and Kherson. And there's also been reports about potentially Russia giving up territory in those two regions as a way to meet halfway and try to reach some deal. Now, with those developments in Pokrovsk and Kupiansk as well, could we see things change on the negotiating table?
I don't see any sort of the changes, honestly. And
Why?
like Ukraine will not give up those territories. It's already evident. There was the attempt to push Zelensky during the latest meeting of Ukrainian delegation and the American one. We know it from the legacy media information published Wall Street Journal. Axios, I think they published this information that Donald Trump even himself said for Ukraine to give up those territories for peace. But those territories, it's the main line of the last, let's say, the defense line of
Mm.
Ukraine. All of those settlements, starting from Slavyansk, finishing with Konstantinivka. By the way, the fight for Konstantinivka may start also even this year because Russia is advancing there. So it's the only line which keeps Russia from potential breakthrough to Dnipro, to Kharkiv. We shouldn't trust really Putin with his promise to stop at Donetsk, Luhansk Oblast, and maybe he will give Zaporizhia and Kherson. First of all, like, if Zaporizhia and Kherson, Russia already put in their constitution. How can you give up those regions? How can you not attempt to get those fully under control? And if they say about those 5 regions, including Crimea, which they put in their constitution, why are they fighting now in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, in Kharkiv region? They're very active. Kupiansk is part of Kharkiv. They're
Yeah,
attacking
of course,
northern part
yes.
of Kharkiv, Sumy.
Mm.
So I think that idea for Russia in general is to expand as much as they can in Ukraine.
Could it be?
And
But could
it's...
it? Could it?
Mm,
Could it be for the reason they're doing this and pressuring
mhm,
other cities outside the Donbass is to be able to force Ukraine to accept their terms? So, for example, Ukraine, started invaded Russian territory last year for that same reason,
mhm,
to pressure Russia to the negotiating table,
mhm.
and they gave him a chip. So, could it be a negotiating chip? But the ambitions of Putin could still be Kherson, Luhansk, Donbass, and Zaporizhia.
I think they will not stop. Like, it's my personal opinion, but we don't know internal kitchen of Putin, and of course, with 100% I cannot state his moves, but judging on the history, Russia started the special military operation, so-called, even towards Kiev, even towards Chernihiv, Sumy. It was the massive attack, and they had the attempt to go to Odessa, Mykolaiv. So I think it is wider than Donbass, Kherson, Zaporizhia. I think that idea is just basically to to get Ukraine as
Mm.
the at least pro-Russian state, like Belarus, for example, something like that. So to put the puppet
Okay.
regime, if Ukraine is not okay with that, okay, let's push Ukraine with military. Let's create this internal crisis. Also, yeah, the motivation for people to elect different government, something
But
like that.
if we see a peacekeeping force, a European peacekeeping force in Ukraine
Hmm.
as part of the peace deal, that makes it a lot harder to make Ukraine like Belarus to make it into a puppet state when you have Ukrainian troop presence in the region. So if a peace deal includes a European peacekeeping force on that border, do you think then you'd be more comfortable in accepting that Trump's ambitions, or to say ambitions, but at least reasonable plans will be to invade more Ukrainian territory beyond the peace deal?
Yeah, I think it will be like more difficult for Russia to invade if European peacekeeping forces. I think Ukrainian government would agree on any sort of the peacekeeping forces, including with the Europeans, like, for example, some third countries, even from China. I think Ukraine would agree on that. Not from Belarus, but from those. But it's very difficult to control this entire territory. The front line is very wide. Russia attacks
Massive, yeah.
massively to disperse the Ukrainian army all alongside the front lines. At the same time, Russia has two or three maximum hotspots where they attack. But yeah, it's not like North South Korea where there is a thin line. Yeah, here it's more difficult to control. Even during the Donbass, not before special military operation, which Putin announced, there was also the confrontation in Donbass, and it was difficult to control. Like OSCE organization, they did very poor monitoring. They didn't have enough men. There was no real leverage to control properly. So, and now it's wider front lines.
Mm.
We'll see how it goes, but I don't see like the light at the end of the tunnel. I think that it will be happening like what is happening right now. Then Russia will be slowly, gradually offensing, taking the territories, and Ukraine with limited military resources will be forced to surrender territory little by little, saving the man, hopefully not doing mistakes, making mistakes. But Ukraine just has a limited. Ukraine. Why I say that Ukraine cannot return Pokrovsk? Because Ukraine has less resources. Ukraine cannot return Crimea. Ukraine cannot return Donbass. The only actually variant for Ukraine to return back its territories, like some people say 1991, is for Russian regime or Russia itself to collapse, like it was with the Soviet Union after Afghan war. Yeah, or the Afghan war was ongoing for 10 years.
Mm.
And by the way, it could also not be about Putin. It could be about Russia itself, because if we take this parallel with Afghan war, it started with Brezhnev, then there was Andropov, Chernenko, so they were dying, those secretaries of the Soviet Union.
Mm.
But the war continued because
Mm.
Soviet Union is still a Soviet Union, same regime. And only after just before the collapse of Soviet Union, Afghan war finished. So I think it will be, but it started because of the personal ambitions of Brezhnev in
Yeah,
Afghanistan.
exactly. There's a lot of
Yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
One of Putin's fears will be the Ukraine war, leading to the collapse of the current regime, like what happened in the collapse of the Soviet Union after the US kind of lured Russia into Afghanistan. But I want to ask you about the casualty figures, because that's something anyone I
Hmm.
interview, they always give me different figures. If they're on the Russian side, they say Russia's figures are barely anything, and Ukraine is just losing thousands of soldiers a week. And when I speak to people on the Ukrainian side, it's the complete opposite. Now Russia's hemorrhaging bodies. What are the figures that you've seen on the ground, or based on all the
The
data that you look at?
figures are, of course, we shouldn't believe Russian or Ukrainian statistics. I believe standard if attacking side is attacking, it usually has 3-4 times more losses. It's according to the book. That's why they should have 3-4 times more power to be successful in attacks. That's why Russia, obviously, according to any sort of the war book, has more losses than Ukraine.
True.
But Ukraine has also huge losses. That's why on my channel, I sometimes say that what is happening in Ukraine, the main problem is with armament. I'm myself from Ukraine. Yeah, I choose to leave it, and I understand how our guys sacrifice. What I do on my channel, it's pro-Ukrainian biased. I would say I try to give truthful information, but I'm Ukrainian myself, so it's not always happening like that. So we have some sort of the pro-Ukrainian bias here. But I want to tell truth, especially about the armament, the mobilization that now Ukraine is forced to take the men just from the streets to put them in the army, even against their will. And I
Mm.
think it's like we may have the similarity with the United States during the Vietnam War. Then many of the guys left to Canada